Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today I'm speaking with Brad Loomis and Alberto Nunez all about nutrition for powerlifting. And even if you're not a competitive powerlifter, we'd like to think that there's some valuable lessons in here for any lifter or person who's chasing strength goals. We begin this one by examining the differences in how our coaches would start a powerlifting athlete versus how we would start a physique athlete. Brad and Bert tell us what they look for as soon as they make first contact with the lifter, and a lot of the common reasons that these athletes need nutritional guidance up front. Then we get into how the coaches manage a powerlifting off-season, what their strategies are to get athletes to make weight, and how they periodize dietary intake to fit within certain training cycles for maximum performance benefits. Again, off-season bodybuilders, as well as general lifting enthusiasts who don't compete, can still learn a lot from this one, so we hope you peeps from all areas of strength sport can stick around and get a fresh take on what we do. If you have any feedback or comments on this episode, as always, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast 107. This is Nutrition for Powerlifters with Alberto Nunez and Brad Loomis. So Brad, when you get an application, because I know you've had a lot lately, when you get an application and someone says, I am a power lifter versus when they're a bodybuilder, what do you look for differently within their application?
Wow, that's a good question.
Thanks. I just came up with it.
Gosh, it's so hard to tell just at one glance, with the application.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I'll compare, because, a lot of folks, whether they're actually following it or not, they'll put something in there as far as macros or calories or something, right? So, usually if they do have something like that, I'll just kind of just quickly look and make sure that it looks like they're eating enough. Okay. So like an obvious red flag would be a 200-pound human eating 1,600 calories a day.
Yeah.
That would be kind of a red flag for me. But yeah, outside of that, it's usually not very revealing in the application as much as when we first meet, or at least when we start collecting data, right? If we start collecting data and they send me the sheets, or like with my new folks, I'm getting them recording things on G Drive that I can just take a glance at any time. That's when it starts to get to be more revealing. When you find out things like, oh wow, this person's a little bit deficient in protein, or oh look at their weight is going down. That's kind of a red flag too. So yeah, just at first glance, the application doesn't help me out a lot, except for the obvious red flag of, like I just mentioned before, a big discrepancy.
Okay. And we still ask for photos. Like do you compare that to the physique still, even if they're not a competitive bodybuilder? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the photos aren't very helpful with powerlifters, because a lot of times, sometimes they'll just kind of post up something kind of goofy, I remember somebody posted up, they like photoshopped, what's her name? The gal that plays in Avengers.
Which one?
The
redhead?
assassin.
Oh.
Yeah, the red. What's her name? Anyway, they photoshopped her face. Yes. Yes. Whoever that actor is, they photoshopped her face on their head, and they were just kind of standing there, So yeah, really, to be honest with you, that's pretty common. I don't usually evaluate the physiques much with the powerlifters. I'll look at kind of their, what their body weight is, what their goals are, number one, in fact, that's usually kind of my first go-to, is what their goals are. And then I'll kind of start looking, okay, how much are they eating compared to their body weight? Do they have a competition on the horizon? What's their split look like? Things like that. But yeah, it's when we start collecting data that we really start being able to find meaningful things.
Yeah. What about you, Bert? Is there anything super different when you first get someone?
Well, usually, so powerlifters, like full-fledged powerlifters, that's what they do. This hair is so crazy. Let me get this down. There we go.
It's
For the
beautiful.
people on the tubes. They usually started out doing this because they came from, they like more of a general fitness or bodybuilding type background. So at some point, they did have some sort of nutritional system in play. And what usually ends up happening is they just didn't enjoy it. They started, practicing things they weren't necessarily ready for. Often you'll hear things like, "Hey, I'm so glad that like I don't bodybuild anymore, or that's not my main focus anymore because I don't want to eat 7 meals a day and like eat these like 6 foods or things like that, right?" So they usually they tried it at some point, but at this point, like what they do is so. By the time they usually get to us, like they're so deep into powerlifting that they don't realize how much more they can extract from themselves by just following some simple principles on the nutritional side of things. So, whatever it is that I do give them eventually in regards to structure, they've done far worse. They just don't realize that there is, I guess, an in-between, and especially an in-between that's based off principles that actually do matter. So more than anything, right from the get-go, I'm going to assume that like my powerlifters haven't watched Eric Helms's like nutritional pyramid on how things work. So we go through some of the basics, try to do some things that right away will impact their training. Maybe like let's try to control that pre-workout meal a little bit more and find something that like feeds us well. The protein feedings, like that's a huge one. Like a lot of powerlifters just eat, but they don't really stop what they're doing throughout the day to eat protein. I will say, actually, I do kind of look at pictures. Initially I was like, oh yeah, with Brad's like, why are they sending me pictures? Why are you trying to flex, dude? But but what the pictures sometimes tell you is like what class you kind of belong in, like maybe someone's too lean and it's like, like we have room to grow into the next one, right? Or sometimes someone is so all over the place with their nutrition that whatever, like their current body comp is not even helping them from a leverage standpoint anymore. It's just like all over the place, right? And maybe with those folks, it's like, hey, we can be more effective weight class down. So that first application is interesting when it comes to powerlifters. I think by the time they do come see us, they realize that there is something I can get from this nutrition, but they're flinching because they kind of expect us to take them back to where they were at some point where like the system is overwhelming, But usually just getting them rolling with the fundamentals is a great place to start.
Yeah. So is that, like you said, a lot of times they tried things before they were ready. What do you mean by that?
So when you look at like just think about the first nutritional strategy you ever used. Chances are it was not appropriate. Chances are you took it up for the wrong reasons. I think my first like formal diet I had one or two that I can recall was one when I was on 14 grams of fat a day. I remember that.
What?
Yeah. 14 grams of fat a day was what I was eating. It worked really well, but it was just overwhelming in regards to like what I could eat. And then I went on a ketogenic diet maybe like a year later for my second cut in my teen years. So like totally inappropriate. Like just I didn't really know my fundamentals. And to be honest, I think that's why a lot of powerlifters end up powerlifting. Like when you look at the sport, it's not super appealing in a way. Because it's like I'm going to like, for most of us, like just most people can't see past because we think of lifting heavy in a general like I said your usual gym atmosphere. Like we think ego lifting. So people often associate powerlifting with like these are just these folks who they want a platform to ego lift, and it's the furthest thing from that. So most people don't look into powerlifting right away. They do something else. Whether it be CrossFit, bodybuilding, something like that. And then eventually it takes them there. And usually bodybuilding or like even CrossFit, like it comes with a starter kit that's just way too overwhelming for someone who's just barely trying to get into this and develop good habits and like learn how things work.
Yeah, and it's not like the actual starter kit, it's what you think the starter kit is.
Yeah.
Okay. So Brad, whenever you said that the most meaningful part isn't just well, it's obviously, right, the most meaningful part isn't just the application, but I feel like you might have implied that when you have a bodybuilder, you can learn a lot more from their application than you can a powerlifter. That would have a whole lot of upward inflection and questioning.
Yeah. I think that our application is just kind of it's kind of tuned more towards bodybuilders. A physique. There you go, a physique athlete. That's a better way to put it. Because usually, bodybuilders, they're a little bit more meticulous about their nutrition, and so they actually list like macros, or they'll list some sort of a percentage. And then because we are going after a certain look, the pictures are much more applicable, right? And so I think that just the nature of our application is kind of tuned more toward the physique athlete. And I don't think that it's possible to have an application where you can upload a video of your best lift, or
I mean, it's
something.
Possible. Yeah, like it's possible, but I get what you're saying. Like inherently, there's some things you need to know about your powerlifting athlete that can only come with performance. And which is, kind of the opposite, right? A web page is really good at showing. And like we talked about with Eric, which we'll probably get into later, like there are athletes who can show you videos at the gym, which is nothing like their performance on the platform, but we'll go into that later. But sure. I get what you're saying. Like it's a visual and text-based application can serve you more when you're looking at someone whose aim is a visual aim. Than someone who,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah, sure.
And what are you collecting during that first month period that tells you a lot, or that's really impactful for a powerlifting athlete?
Yeah, pretty much what I do is I don't give them macros per se. You know what I mean? Actually, not even per se. I don't give them macros. Usually I give them some sort of an instruction, though. If you're not already, having a meal prior to your training, within 2 to 3 hours, start, right? And then outside of that, I just say, I just want you tracking your food and logging it. If you know the macros, log them. And if you don't know the macros, at least know the calories and log them. And then log your body weight. Log your body weight under the same circumstances 3 to 4 times a week. And that's really pretty much it. And it's funny because most power lifters / even gen pop athletes to a certain extent, they don't have a problem with that. They're just like, oh, okay, I'll just log my calories, or, oh, okay, I'll just get my body weight in the morning, a couple, 3 times a week. It's always the more meticulous ones that they're like, well, what macros do you want me to hit? What calories should I hit? And so it's a little bit of a relief when they're just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to eat like normal, but I'm going to log my calories. I'm going to track my calories. And usually that's very revealing. If I see over the course of 3 weeks, a month, their body weight's going down, that sometimes will kind of raise a red flag. I mean, why is their body weight going down? Are they trying to make a weight class? Well, then I got to go back to the application. Is it their first time competing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And usually about that time is when we meet anyway. And I can say, okay, you know what? I think we need to actually eat in a surplus. I think we need to program a specific rate of gain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and say, you know what? Let's just get on the platform if you're a first timer. Let's not worry about a weight class, but let's make sure that your nutrition is supporting your training. And then we'll just let the weight do what it will once we have a good nutritional program, kind of quantifying things.
Yeah. For the listeners, just to clarify, that data he was all just talking about is pre-start data. So that's not even we've met the coach yet. Because the way our coaching works is you do an application, you have a few corresponding emails with the coach that sets up your initial Skype, and then you meet them. And so what Brad's talking about is application 2.0. We know you're on, you've paid for your appointment. We know we will be talking to you and setting up a long-term plan, but between now and then, may as well get a better picture numerically with what you're eating and what you're weighing and how your body responds to that. So you're basically not wasting coaching time.
Exactly. Yeah, because that is so valuable. That information is so valuable.
And that's the thing most
there's
people
always
don't
a
wait
lag.
to do, that no one wants to wait to do on their own, right, is make their own baseline. They want a calculator or whatever, but in this way,
Yeah.
it's like we're creating your calculator in essence.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And there's always a lag time. So what else are we going to do? So we
Yeah.
might as well start collecting that kind of stuff. And it kind of makes, I don't know, it just kind of makes the starting point kind of like hitting the ground running in a way. You know what I mean? Because we already know everything. And on the client's end, they feel like they're doing something. Even though they haven't officially started coaching, they feel like they're moving that direction, and they kind of already are being coached in a way.
Yeah. Sometimes people just need that accountability to. Okay. So Bert, do you start yours in that same manner?
No.
Okay.
Actually maybe 50-50. Let me see. Okay, so I guess I've just gotten good enough at this point. I can ask a person enough questions, and I kind of know where their maintenance is going to be. Like usually it's like they can even tell me like what they're, and I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. Like it's just like I got categories, and it's like, this is not how it actually works. But yeah, I think especially with powerlifters, the biggest thing is they can be so out of touch with just what you would consider a base diet for any sort of strength athlete. And again, like the center of that is going to be like just your regular protein feedings. Like, for example, if all three of us go and have a meal post-workout, we're probably going to, whatever restaurant that is like the first things first is like we start with protein and then everything else kind of follows. Whereas like these dudes will go and it's like, so you had mac and cheese, right? Right? Like that was the post. Like that's where some of those people are. And depending on like what kind of person they are, people who are underreporters are underreporters, people who are overreporters are overreporters. But usually whatever you are, you're really good at that. Like the skinny guy that eats everything. It's like, no, you don't, dude. No, you don't. Not even close. And then the same thing with the person who swears that, they're 220 pounds and they're gaining weight on like 2,000 calories. It's like, no, dude, I just saw you eat 2,000 calories right now. So more often than not, I will just, when it's time to start, it's like, these are the numbers. This is how we're going to hit them. If you need help creating some sort of menu, we will do that because like I want the data to be accurate, and that's usually how I do it. Like whether it be when we start or maybe a bit before, it's like, here, I'm gonna force feed you these numbers. This is what you're eating because I think this is what your maintenance should be, or this is what, like for example, if they want to lose weight, I'm like, you're going to lose weight on these numbers, but I want to see how much. Start these now.
Okay.
So yeah, usually instead of just having them do more of what they're doing, because usually it's like, I'm like, man, it's probably shitty anyways. Let me just tell you what you should be doing, get a head start on that, and then we have data that's more helpful rather than you just practicing your old habits or just giving me data that's probably like not even 100% correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's usually how I kick that off. And usually, the powerlifter is actually quite surprised as to how maybe after 1 week, like this is pretty easy, and they almost immediately see, because again we cut out all those extra rules that they maybe at some point believed were part of following some sort of nutritional program, and yeah, almost right away they see it when it comes to their training. They're like, holy crap! Usually I'm really fatigued when I get to this session, and I feel better already, and like things really start to, because if you're following the basics, like I'd say a good nutritional program, if you're a powerlifter, might mean like 5%. But if you are like just a disaster, which is like pretty common, man, it's way more than that.
It's funny. Both of y'all said that the first like 2 weeks to a month, you'll see pretty big changes in most of your lifters.
Yeah.
Upward or downward with body weight. That's funny. Do most powerlifting athletes that come onto our roster or that apply with us have body weight goals? Like pretty much every physique athlete, it's pretty clear. Like you're coming to us for prep. You're coming to us for this thing that is very extreme that most people can't do on their own, right? And then for a power lifter, it's like, you really could do it on your own, right? If you're like, but why, I don't know, do you find that people want body comp changes? Do you find that people are hitting plateaus with their strength? Are the reasons different? Because I've never like even with the 2 years or whatever, I was like coaching with 3DMJ. I might have had a powerlifter or two here or there, but they were physique athlete first, and we went that way. But I never had my roster open to just intaking powerlifting clients like you guys do. So I'm actually don't know the answer to this one. Fill me in a little bit, Brad. We'll do Brad and then Bert.
I think for me, it's because I get a lot of more, I guess, beginners, first time, second time, competing powerlifters.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't really have a body weight goal per se.
Okay.
They have an idea, but usually it's not very realistic. They're
What do you
walking
mean?
around at, well, they're walking around at like 80 kilos, and they're saying, oh, I think I would be perfect in the 74 kilo class. And I'm, immediately trying to talk them out of that, So yeah, a lot of first timers and second timers, they have an idea of what they want to do, but it's just not going to be conducive to, performing as a power lifter and making yourself stronger. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are the majority of my athletes. I need to give them a lot of guidance on what we should do as far as body weight goals. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I only have a few athletes that need to make a weight class, and so in that situation, one that comes to mind is a 74 kilo lifter who just naturally walks around at about 75 and a half, 76 kilos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not bad at all. We're looking at like, they walk around like 3 to 5 pounds heavier, than their competition weight, and can really do a good job of staying there, but this is also a former a former bodybuilder. So he's very in tune, with his, what he needs to perform good. You know what I mean? But I would imagine that probably as we kind of, pass the microphone to Bert, who's probably worked with more higher level competitive athletes. Yeah, the higher level ones are the ones that do have body weight goals. They do need to make a weight class, or they find that they compete better in a specific weight class, or they want to try jumping up to a higher weight class, and see if the Wilks score is better and things like that. I haven't had a lot of experience with that. I mean, I've had a little bit, but it's
I was
like
gonna say, you just had a guy get second at nationals in New Zealand, right? I was gonna say.
Yeah, New Zealand nationals. Yeah, he was the one that I was actually speaking of. In fact, Chris, way to go, bud. You made me look really good. But yeah, I've dabbled in it, where I've had like really large humans, like, 105 kilo, humans that can easily make their weight class, and if they want to make a weight class that's lower than that, it's pretty easy to do. When you're that big, it's pretty easy to lose large amounts of weight, and even do a little bit of a water cut to make that weight class. But like I said, just dabbled here and there, one off here, one off there, etc. A great deal of mine, there's a little bit of pressure that's lifted off of the coach, because we're just going to get up there and we're going to set PRs and we're going to have fun, And so what we do now is going to set us up for that through the things that Bert talked about, making sure we're having our protein feedings, making sure we're having a good pre-workout, meal, things like that. We're eating the proper amount of calories, in a day, so that we can get stronger.
Gotcha. What about you, Bert?
Okay, so the question was about recomp and like how many.
Well,
often is that a goal?
Sort of.
Or sort of body weight goals.
No, it was. Okay. Well, it was just more like, what's if someone is coming to us for powerlifting, is it because, like, what is their biggest struggle? Is it usually like, I can't get stronger, or is it I can't make my weight class, or is it I just need guidance because I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I like lifting, like.
I'd say the order is going to be weight class influenced. Okay. And it honestly, that's why I thought recomp, because often as much as people don't want to admit this, like everyone wants to be like jacked, they want to look like the part. You lift superhero weights, but like I wouldn't mind looking like a superhero too, right? So if like if this is what these people do, like that's definitely something they inquire about. Maybe a little bit, maybe not so much initially, but afterwards they're like, hey, do you think I can look right at some point, right? So there's that one. And then I think the smallest percentage is just folks who they're doing everything right. They're in the right weight class and they're just looking for that 5%,
Yeah.
But yeah, usually it's weight class influenced. And like Brad said, often you do have to break the news out that it's like, you know what, like you're not fit for that weight class you're trying to like fit in. Let's make sure that as we move up to the next one, that it's it's good weight that we're putting on, because I think that's the issue. Is that people see that next weight class and they see what the totals look like there, and then you look at what's like in the weight class lower, and that is appealing because you're like, man, it's like I'm closer to that than whatever the next weight class is. So and it's kind of a short term, like, yeah, you're thinking like in the right now as opposed to like what you can, because you signed up to get strong. Like that is the main thing. And if you gain weight, you're going to get stronger. And think about what total you rather like. You rather have like a good total in the weight class up above you and the one you're currently trying to fit into. But yeah, often the case, I say it's 50-50. It's like, you know what, I don't think we should do this is my answer. I feel that, we would be more successful long-term if we just started working on the next weight class up. But every once in a while, you will get someone that's like, whoa, you have enough things going on where, like, yeah, we can totally make it painless for you, so that you can be, a little bit closer to the top end of that weight class. And often it just goes back to what I started off with. They just have no idea what they're eating. Their calories will be a little bit lower, but hey, when you throw fruits and vegetables in there now, it's like, hey, this ain't too hard. A high protein diet, oh, that helps with satiety as well. So it's kind of 50-50, but it can be hard sometimes to tell an athlete that, you know what, like I can get you to that weight class, but I don't think it's the best thing for you. And I think usually they kind of know, but I think they feel that by outsourcing like their situation to us, it's like we're going to justify this goal that might not be all the way appropriate, when in reality, like half the time we're like, nah, let's just move up. So yeah, weight class is definitely, I'd say, the primary reason that most people come to us to help them with whatever it is that they need or think they need.
Interesting. That's are most how do I ask this? Okay, so most people that come to us that are physique athletes most of the time, right? Not all the time, but most of the time they're like, I want to compete this season or this coming year or within the next whatever. Is that the same for powerlifters, Brad? Do you get most people that have competitions in sight or in the next 6 months maybe, or do you have people that are like, hey, I want to be a powerlifter in the next 5 years? Groom me now so that I can be strong or whatever?
Yeah, half and half, 50%, 50%. Okay. Yeah. I just recently had a client come to me that wanted to do a powerlifting meet in 8 weeks, and then extend, beyond that and get better over the next, 3 to 5 years, which was kind of a neat thing, actually. That's something that I have not done before. So we had to just kind of run a real quick macro, just short mesos with volume and a short, intensity kind of a taper. But I'm kind of starting with this little dude at ground level, and it's kind of exciting to see where we're going to go, and immediately right after the powerlifting competition, he had no trouble making the weight class. And, he's like, should I cut down? And I'm like, well, you know what? Do you want to be a powerlifter or do you want to be a bodybuilder? Because if you want to be a powerlifter, we do not want to cut right now, and immediately he came right back, Coach, I want to be a powerlifter, so it's 50-50. It's 50-50. Guys and gals that want to do a powerlifting competition, on the horizon, and then ones that say, okay, groom me now so that I can do powerlifting in the future. Ironically, you'd be amazed how many bodybuilders like or find powerlifting very enticing after their competitions. I've got 4 that are now power lifters that got done doing physique competitions, earlier in the year, and one on the horizon. And I think it's just because, I can't speak for them, but when you're in that state after a long prep of getting down to uber lean, state, you miss that reason that you got into the gym. You got into the gym so that you could not only look better, but you could be stronger, and you could lift heavier weights, and you could be like that guy that's, bench pressing with 4 plates on the bar, and things like that. And so they do want to get that strength back. And I find that's a really good recovery method. Is, we're in this kind of a fragile state. Let's just kind of start going that way and train with lower repetitions, auto-regulate load, and start getting us that way. Unfortunately, they think that they can stay in the weight class that they're geared for now, at stage weight. And sometimes we have to throw that out the window once they actually start enjoying their food and enjoying the lifestyle of eating over being lean.
It happened to me. Yeah. I was like 123 after my recovery, and I was like, Bert, there's no way we're getting over 130. It took me like 4 weeks to get over 130. And then I was like, there's no way.
And then at a certain point, you're just like, screw body weight. I look fine. I'm really enjoying eating and looking and lifting like I'm lifting, and performing like I'm performing. But to answer your question, it's half and half. And I have to say that I really like the prospect of grooming people over their career.
Yeah.
As opposed to getting them ready in this 8, 12, 15, 20 weeks for their competition.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess to piggyback off that, Berto, we were talking about, or I just posted about some on Instagram, one of your athletes, Sean, a couple days ago. And I know y'all did something really different with his not off season even, because he competes a lot, right? But between his meets, y'all have been making some different decisions than he's made before. That are what I would think would be seen as unconventional for most powerlifters. Can you talk about what y'all are doing?
Yeah. So Sean Noriega, who is he's as good as it gets in powerlifting. Mm-hmm. So straight contender, and the weight class does matter, right? Yeah. So with him, we were just literally looking for that 5% in performance. We came into this looking for what can we do to clean up the way you're currently approaching your nutrition in order to maximize your performance on the platform. Lucky for me, Sean at some point was actually overweight. So
lucky for you.
So lucky because he was a macronator at some point. So he knew how to track, he knew how to do all that stuff. He just wanted help with the decision making. So our first prep together, it was a meet to qualify for nationals and just kind of see how things were going. It was, well, actually, so we did, and I'll get to exactly what we did, but
yeah,
I reversed the plan on him because after that competition, what we were supposed to do is during the period of time where we were going to build up as much muscle as possible, during these volume blocks far away from competition, I'm like, boy, I'm going to feed you. And then somewhere in the middle, before we actually start tapering and really getting aggressive with our loads, we're going to diet a little bit there, get a little bit closer, and then bring back the food. I guess he was so green to just a few things that we were doing on the nutritional side of things, during his last meet prep, the meet prep before, that he put on a crap ton of muscle. And I was like, we got enough muscle right now to be as strong as we need to be to a place where we want to be at nationals. What I think we should do is go through a fat loss block early on in the training, post meet, while it's still ramping up, get some of this excess off you. And I swear to you, dude, within the confines of a high protein diet where we're utilizing carbohydrate correctly, which means like pre-training, and when you are on limited calories, when there isn't enough calories to go around, this is where like your fat to carb ratios do matter, because carbs that's what's going to power your training. So we were on a lower fat diet, which to him was a little weird, but it gave us enough carbohydrate to train well enough during this beginning, the beginning of the training leading up to nationals. So we lost a crap ton of fat there. I think because at this point he had really found himself with the nutritional system that we had. He actually, given where he was in that block, he was stronger than ever, recovering really well, even though he was losing fat. So again, it's kind of sort of what bodybuilders have to do in order to look right on stage. It's like we don't lose fat and lose performance. Like if we want to look right, we have to maintain a certain level of performance. So it's something that we do like all the time. And I think to powerlifters, it's kind of weird that you could, like, is that how it works? Because I think most of them do appreciate just how good calories are at clearing fatigue. Like above all things, they understand that part. But yeah, we did really well during the fat loss block. And now we're 7 weeks out from nationals, and he just got his food bumped back up to the point where he's basically eating his refeed calories every single day. His carbohydrates are at about 500. So we're still prioritizing carbohydrates over fat because it is something that's maintenance surplus, small surplus. But the fun part is going to be as we get closer to the meet, this is where I'm just going to power bulk the dude. And I think anyone who's power bulked will tell you that it was glorious, with the exception that like I got really fat at the end, but I just kept like week after week making these strength gains, right? So with Sean, we're so close to the weight class right now that as we taper into the meet, and so it's not going to be even close to like, I guess, your typical power bulking like that some of us have experienced, because usually the program was crap. His coach, Joey Flex, for those of you guys who don't know, is a wizard when it comes to Sean. Yeah, 3 X's, triple X. No, three. He goes 3.
Like Vin Diesel.
Yeah. the Italian cuddly Vin Diesel. But yeah, so he's got a good feel for him, and they always do a great job like getting him into that platform feeling fresh and recovered. But you combine that with the power bulking that we're going to go through, his calories will be riding high going into nationals, and that's different compared to how most powerlifters do it. Like most powerlifters, the way they do it is like, so we're like over 6 weeks away from like the competition. I'm just kind of eating anything and everything, not really like paying that close of attention to like my body weight. And then during the most important part where you're supposed to be clearing all this fatigue and you want to be somewhat predictable on that platform, they go through these hypocaloric phases, and that's so backwards. So with Sean, it was like cut the fat early so that we're closer. And lucky for us, and I think a lot of this is just how hard Sean works. He was able to get stronger during that fat loss phase. And we all know as bodybuilders that, hey, you can do that for a short little window. Yeah. Not permanently, but if you're motivated enough and you do things right, you can do that for a little bit. And now, unlike the majority of the people who will be competing at nationals, and I can say that with good confidence, like we're going to be eating leading into this very important meet. And not only are we going to be eating a little bit, but like it's going to be excessive, and we're going to ensure that at least on the nutritional side of things, he's getting everything that he needs in order to show up. Yeah,
and that's, I think, such a good example, and I'm glad it's recent too. Like that, I guess that there is shit you can do. Like you said, there is that 5%, and I think, like you said, there's a lot of people that think if they work that hard in their training, and I think. Observationally, right, bodybuilders have a better understanding that it's a 24/7 thing, and I feel like powerlifters, it's like the 3 or 4 hours I'm at the gym because I take that long is all I got to do. And it works to an extent, to a pretty big extent, like just working hard in the gym. But I guess when it gets to that point, right, and not that it has to get to that point, but when you're that high level, it's worth.
Absolutely. And again, like since we kind of roam on both sides, like we see where like I really wish bodybuilders would become better technicians with like the barbell, because like it sucks to see someone who it's like, dude, you're so strong as it is, but you can't even bench press right. Imagine if we taught you to like to bench press right. Like you'd get so much more out of this lift, and it would stop hurting you every like 8 weeks or something like that. So we can kind of see what both sides aren't doing well. And when it comes to like getting the most out of our calories, that's something that like bodybuilders have been doing for a long time.
Yeah. So I think lesson there is like, would you rather eat into a meat where performance matters, or would you rather diet into it, right? Where it's obviously different for a bodybuilder, but that's the lesson as far as a meat prep goes.
Hi again, guys. Just hopping in for a quick reminder that we have recently released the 3DMJ Lifting Library. This is our all-in-one video course solution to perfecting the essential movements and exercises that every bodybuilder needs to know and execute well. We created this course because, in our experience, hypertrophy plateaus and lagging body parts are primarily due to misperformed exercises. And more importantly, incorrect technique can lead to wasted volume, injuries, and long-term burnout. You might be surprised just how far a lifter can get with bad form, as we at 3DMJ have seen improper movement patterns at all levels of athlete. But eventually, these experienced trainees come to us because they've hit a wall in progress. And when this happens, the first thing we ask for is a collection of their lifting videos to look for any holes in their exercise execution. Why? Because this is not a beginner's problem. This is an area of concern for all athletes and coaches who care about their bodies and results. If you'd like to learn more about this course and get some free video tutorials, go to liftinglibrary.com and sign up for the free trial. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Do you think maybe, and like Brad, you were just talking about a powerlifter who you're going to have for the long term, right? And if you have a powerlifter that maybe does have a full year or longer before a season of like 3 meets, say, is there a type of nutritional approach, like a long-term nutritional strategy beyond the basics that you like? Like, do you run cycles of cutting, Brad? Do you keep them as heavy as possible, right up under their weight class, stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. Because it just kind of makes sense if you've got training periodization. You want to kind of have nutrition periodization as well, right? So yeah, if we do need to cut, kind of like Berto alluded to, the perfect time to do a cut is when you are in that high intensity, low volume phase of training, right? So if you're going to run like an 8-week block of intensity, maybe now we can kind of pick on our calories a little bit. Maybe now we can kind of just limit our carbohydrate to prior to training, and then outside of that, just kind of the meat and veggies. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes we don't even necessarily need to hit macros or even really track calories. As long as we're getting a good pre-workout meal that's got carbohydrate and protein and fat in it, and then the other couple of meals, 2 meals, whatever, just have protein and veggies, they still perform very good. And it just kind of seems to kind of fall off on clockwork. You know what I mean? Maybe the first week or two, there's not much change. We might have got that initial 1 pound, 2 pound dump, and then it just kind of lingers there. But then it's like they don't even have to try, and the weight just kind of starts to fall off. And then once we're out of that cycle and we want to start running the next volume cycle, then we can kind of start feeding that person a little bit more, and we can start saying, okay, let's keep our vegetables intact, but maybe let's just add a little bit more carbohydrate to this meal and to that meal, etc. Right? So yeah, and it's really fun. That's why I like to have calendars with all my spreadsheets, where I've got everything laid out. This is volume cycle 1 of 2, week 1, 2, 3, etc. We're going to feed you during this part. This is volume cycle 2 of 2, and we're going to feed you. And they've got 1 week, 2, and 3. And then now this is intensity cycle 1 of whatever, or 1 of 1. And now we're going to feed you. And then it gives, it just kind of gives the client a little bit of reassurance that they know what's going to happen on the horizon. You can see right there in the notes. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? November I'll get to eat. Perfect. Thanksgiving's coming up.
Yeah.
Things like that. But yeah, I mean, that's in my opinion, it just makes sense because yeah, we do want to get strong, but we don't want to get
sloppy.
A lot. Exactly. We don't want to get like that guy that we always see in the Instagram posts on gym fuckery and those kind of things.
Hey, I remember when the powerlifter used to be just like the big bearded fat dude. I remember, so there was this dude that we kind of came up the same generation. Like I did my bodybuilding, he did his powerlifting. And like to me, like the moment I made it as a bodybuilder was like the first time like I was like on stage tan with some other guys and I didn't look like a fool. Like that was like, yeah. And I remember for him, his Facebook profile ended up being, because he started like as not a thin kid, but I'd say probably as big as like Brad's son Xander. So like, you know, like nothing, not too extreme either way. But he was so proud to post that picture of himself like underneath like a monolift squat with like a beard and like red and like, you know, that totally like
The cliche.
That poster child of like powerlifting like 15 years ago. Like he was so pumped to post, like he's like, I look like a bearded fat guy with high blood pressure.
High blood pressure.
I made it. I look great.
I look like I have high blood pressure.
But that's how it was. And like, and realistically, like when I remember his starting frame, like he probably should have been lifting somewhere in the low 200s, like just barely. But he got himself up to like the 3-somethings because that is what you do. And so that's the key. That's how it was. And now it's different enough where, hey, there is some play with like the weight classes. Like they're all really competitive, and it is a decision that most powerlifters are having to make at some point.
That brings up a good point though. Like what, like for bodybuilders, we've talked about a bajillion times how the hardest part for a lot of people is letting go and getting the weight to put muscle on, right? Because you feel like identity-wise, I'm supposed to look lean, right? And that's the way it is. And I'm sure that happens sometimes. But like, what's the most, I guess, what's the social stigma that you have to fight a lot nutritionally or with decision making with powerlifters?
Ooh,
either y'all have anything on that?
I will say this, like the equivalent of that, like for powerlifters, they kind of go through that is like when they are far away from meat, they're not very good at the single rep stuff. Like, you know, it's kind of like their version of bulking. You know, they're probably better in the 4 to 6 rep range as opposed, and that can freak them out a little bit. But it's different because it doesn't follow them everywhere. Whereas a bodybuilder, when you're the further away you are from a powerlifting meet, the more focused you probably are on, or you're just a little bit more focused on volume as opposed to intensity. So instead of hitting, So, you know, their 1 rep stuff is like maybe they're a 600-pound squatter when they're peaked, but right now on a good day they might be like 550. You know. Yeah. And that can kind of freak you out. But that's just because you have all this fatigue that's accumulated. But that's their version of that. But they don't have to carry that with them. Like, they only notice that when they're in the gym. You know? So I feel that, like, I guess being away from meat or being close to meat, the difference isn't too much. It's not, it doesn't mess with your head that much. I think most of them are pretty good at that. I think where if there is a nutritional, like, stigma is that just that nutrition doesn't matter that much if you are a powerlifter, so long as you're eating sufficient calories most of the time. Yeah. I mean, I say 5%, but again, like some people are just so all over the place that, you know, it's like, hey, let's tidy this up a little bit, and wow, like we're 10% stronger, you know. But then also you have other people who are probably too precise with it. Like it's like, you know, they start, like we've seen it with like macro counters, like it's like they don't want to go out to eat with friends because they don't know what's in that poke bowl or something, you know. And it's like, you don't need to be that, like you're not 4 weeks out from a show. So that's probably, it's like either or. It's and like the middle ground can get you so far in powerlifting. Like, have a general idea of where your calories are at, eat a high protein diet, and do your best to cut. Like, if you have to cut fat in order to make a weight class, like periodically throughout the year, make sure it's during a training block that is like super chill and not that important, you know. So with Sean, when we cut, the majority of our fat was like right after his meet, because guess what? Right after your meet, you're messed up. You're done. Like you can't, you're useless pretty much. So we have to slowly ramp things back up. So it's like, hey, it's a really chill block. Let's just take some fat off you right now. So those would be, those are, if most powerlifters can just get those in order, like it doesn't have to be you don't have to be a bodybuilder. Like, you don't have to be a bodybuilder that's like 4 weeks out with like their Tupperware everywhere. But at the same time, like, powerlifting is not an excuse to just be reckless with something that can potentially help you get better. And yeah, the simple one, most of them do cut fat at some point. They just do it at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so smaller window, and I think we might spend at least a little bit on it, would be if we are cutting into a meet, if that is something we do, like you just said, that person that does it 3 or 4 times a year. Brad, do you have a standard, obviously everyone's different and it's going to be individualized, but a standard protocol for like your favorite X amount of weight has to be cut before this meet? I guess you could start with like, what's the most amount of weight that you would even let someone do it, and then how do you do it?
Yeah, so are you kind of referring specifically to kind of like water cutting? Like, how close do you want to be in order for the water cut to be effective?
Yeah. So like, we executed our long-term nutritional strategy. I like that person. It might have been Chris you were talking about, that hovers just above a few pounds above. And how high above would you consider acceptable for cutting for a meet? If you hover just above it, usually.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to figure it out percentage-wise, because obviously the smaller human is going to need to be closer than the bigger human, right? Because
can we keep picking on Chris? Would that be easy? Since we keep picking on Sean,
how
far away is he? Or go ahead.
Yeah, or even like me, because Chris and I are fairly close. I'm a little bit fatter now because it's been a while since I've competed at that level. But like with me, I could not make the 74 kilo class if I was at 78 kilos, right? So we're looking at 162 is kind of the pounds that I need to be. And if I was 170, I wasn't going to make it. Or if I did, I had to get drastic. Berto saw me, walking on the friggin' treadmill, spitting in a cup by chewing bubblegum at Nationals in 2015 to make that 74 kilo class. And then when I did, I had to strip down naked, in order to do it. So I think, in that perspective, 4 kilos is where I was. I didn't want Chris to be that dramatic in his water cut. I didn't want him to have to go through what I did, basically. So I was really only going to let him, stay about 76 kilos, which is that's 160, 66, about 166, 167. Now, a larger human, I've had like 260 pounders easily drop 18 pounds, doing a 1 week water cut. 20 pounds, it's not uncommon for a 250 pound human to, cut like just under 1% of their body weight in a water cut, right? So obviously those folks can go a little bit further from their weight class, in order to make that weight class just going through the water cut, right? So, we've got two opposite ends of the spectrum. And then obviously a very small human who's like trying to make 132 pounds, or like, say 48, 57 kg, something like that. We're not going to get much of an effect through a water cut there. And we're not going to be able to let that weight go, like I said before, much more than about 2 kilos. And even have a chance at doing a good effective water cut and not lose everything that we've been working so hard for.
Okay, and what's your protocol for Chris or you? I guess we'll say not you because you didn't want to do that. But if you do have a water cut, how do you like to run
it? With Chris, we didn't really even have to do much. I think we just didn't feed him for like 14 hours prior to the meet. I didn't. We were so close, I didn't even worry about it. So I didn't even mention it. I just made sure that his training protocol was where it needed to be. But yeah, I think, we've kind of proven time and time again, fasting for 14 hours prior to a meet doesn't really affect your strength at all. Because at that time, fatigue has been so dissipated anyway that, you don't need a whole lot of calories to dissipate it even more. It's already kind of way, way, way down low. So yeah, with Chris, I didn't even really pay attention, to be honest with you.
Well, and he's a previous bodybuilder too, and he has some tools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, correct. But he's like Berto, he misses a meal, he drops 2 pounds. So that's kind of a nice thing. For me, I've dabbled with two different kinds. Kind of the old fashioned kind where for 3 days you load up on water, salt, and carbs. And then for the next 3 days, you do the exact opposite. You kind of slowly reduce water, cut salt, cut carbs. Super effective. However, as Eric and I both found out, when you do that, you got to make sure and get that salt back in you, or you're going to pass out on the platform. Get that vasovagal response. But Berno actually has a better water cut protocol that I've kind of played with, where you kind of basically eat more carbohydrate. And, Berto, I'm going to just kind of hand the microphone to you and have you talk about that.
I guess so the people are clear, we're usually handling 2-hour weigh-ins, so rather than the 24 that you see.
That's a good point.
Yeah, you see in other federations, which was so new to me when I didn't really become USAPL educated until 2014. I was like, wow, there's this tested federation and they're doing a lot of things right. Because I was so used to the day before. That was just, I thought that was the only way. So the 2-hour thing definitely makes it so that whatever weight class you're aiming for, it better be the right one, and you better not have to do all sorts of wacky things to make it there. So usually, I think if you're maybe 2% above your weight, the cutoff, that's fine. Some people can get 5% off, but I leave that for a more advanced powerlifter who's done this a few times. Maybe you were 2% over. By the time you weighed in, it's or you were past what you needed to be. So that's probably the best way to kind of test what you can get away with. But yeah, like Brad said, we try to keep carbs in, because even if you are doing you're not using a whole lot of volume on, it's not a training day, but you're not lifting, you're lifting singles basically the day of the meet. But anyone who's lifted weights, who's done this for a minute, it's so much easier to lift on muscles that are properly carved up. Your warm-ups feel better, your leverages are what you're used to. So if possible, that is something we try to do. We try to keep carbs in the whole week, more or less where they were the whole time. We shouldn't have been dieting to make it there, not right before the meet. And usually the carbs are going to be things that they're like gummy bears, fruit juices, things that won't add a lot of bulk in your stomach. And it's something that we switched to maybe 2 days up, but the whole week, basically, whatever your water intake was prior to that, we increase it by maybe 30 to 40%. And, how do you not hold water is to just continuously drink water. And then we ride that with sodium. You'll see a huge spike is when you're just a few days away from the meet. And then eventually say the weigh-in is on Saturday. On Friday, you will cut the sodium out, but you keep the water just as high. But you finish your water somewhere around 3 to 4 p.m. So, the water is still high, but it's churning through you. And the last 6 or so hours you have before bedtime, you will lose a great deal of weight because you removed that sodium. But you were able to keep your carbs in. So by the time you're done weighing in and you have made your class, it's as easy as getting some sodium and some water. Food doesn't really matter that much, maybe just enough to give you a little kick, but you already have the stored fuel in there because you didn't cut carbs out. And there's nothing unique about this. This is honestly the way most people in the USAPL do it. It's quite insane how much how much weight you can shake off using just water. And I look at the way we used to do it, when we were doing the 24-hour weigh-ins, we would literally remove carbs many days out, and starve ourselves a few days out, and didn't really pay water the respect that when it comes to this job it definitely has earned. So yeah, that's how we cut into a 2-hour meet, 2-hour weigh-in. And main thing is being able to keep the carbs in there the whole time. Like that completely changes everything. Like after you're done weighing in, it's like, hey, I'm gonna have a few swigs of Clamato and I am ready to go.
Yeah.
And it's I will say that it's pretty trippy when you cut your water off, like, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the next morning you're still peeing like a racehorse. You're just like, how come miserable. Is it? It's weird. It's like I haven't had a drink of water since 3 o'clock yesterday, yet I'm still peeing like a racehorse. It's pretty trippy.
And just because we have to, because hopefully we have bodybuilders that are maybe interested in this too, is that we would never do that with a stage athlete.
No.
Never.
Yeah,
any of that.
No.
Although it sounds nice. And also, you would not just... I wouldn't even do this for like anyone who's like, oh, that's a good way to cut for like vacation. You just look shittier. Anyone who lifts weights would look shittier. If you didn't lift weights, that might be different. Anyone who lifts weights, you would definitely not be as good for the pictures of any sort.
I remember, you always see this like right before meets, like these powerlifters are taking pictures of themselves and they're like, they feel like a bodybuilder because they think that's what we do. And I'm like, you look like total crap right now. Like, but it kind of goes to show you how our minds can, tell us what we, they can play tricks on us. So usually it's like, you shouldn't be proud of that. You look like a mummy.
All right. So a few more questions that are in my brain right now. Do you ever, I know how much it matters for me, but I don't know how often you guys have to talk about like intra-workout nutrition. Is that something that you go over with your athletes? If so, what do you recommend and all that stuff? Brad, you can start.
Okay. It's I kind of give a general guideline. If you're fasting for more than like 5 hours, have something during your training. Because sometimes people do that. We have busy lives, and they ate a big lunch and the rest of their workday was super, super busy. And now here it is, 5, 6 o'clock. They're just now getting done and they got to get to the gym and they got to get their training done. Right. So that's kind of my big guideline. If you have a circumstance like that, have something during your training, have the protein drink with carbs in it that you can get at the gym's pro shop or whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, as long as they had, because like I said, my big recommendation is always, if you don't already have a pre-workout meal, start. Because it's amazing how just a lot of times the calories don't have to be super robust. But you got to still have enough. You can't just skimp and just go in there with like a cup of coffee and some creamer. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, as long as that is covered, most of the time people don't have to have an intra-workout meal. Now, I do think they need to have water because it's amazing how much of people underestimate the performance enhancing effects of water. You start thinking about water and the sodium potassium pump and all that stuff going on and keeping up the blood pressure and everything. Yeah, I feel like regardless of if they're having an intra-workout meal or if they had a good pre-workout meal, they need to have water with them, basically at all times or within reach. An arm length of it. Yeah. Berto, how about you?
Yeah, like what you said, Brad, when was your last meal? That matters. Like some people feel really good eating an hour before, and then they're in there under the bar and no problem. And then some people might need 2 to 3 hours. And maybe for those people, it might be something that you might want to look into. Also, sometimes powerlifting sessions, they can run pretty long. Mm-hmm. I can see why there's like legends of like tales of old Russian like powerlifters, just like in between sets going out and smoking a cigarette. Because, it's like you have time for that stuff. Like you won't, especially with some of the volume that some of these guys work with on the big three, you want to take your time and you want to make sure you get it right. You don't want it to be rushed work. So sometimes you're in there long enough where it's like, wow, it's been 4 or 5 hours since my last meal. Let me just pound away at this Gatorade so that my blood glucose levels just stay at a level where I can perform the way I want to. So yeah, it's very different than like than bodybuilders. Usually for bodybuilders, it's usually something that we use maybe when they're dieting, because as we know, like blood glucose levels kind of tend to zigzag all over the place, and sometimes that can save the last half of your, 70-minute workout that you have at that point. But with these guys, it's just because it takes so long sometimes to get all the work done and get it done right.
Yeah.
It's like a snack while you're studying, basically.
Yeah. No, I can personally, I can definitely tell if I didn't bring Gatorade or if I did. Like definitely. And I don't even do a lot. Like I just do like 10 ounces. That's like 20 carbs. But that's enough if I sip through it that I feel different. Because I'm usually in there at least 2 hours. Do we need meet day recommendations?
I think we should loosely touch on it, because it is something that I think the experienced folks, they kind of have that down, and they know exactly what we're going to say, and y'all can leave class early. But I think for the newer folks, that's always a huge concern. It's like, I know that this meet thing that I'm doing is taking up a chunk of my day. Should I have some sort of plan or schedule?
Yeah, and to expand on that, it's always a good idea, since we just took out all that sodium, we make sure we're going to put that back in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of powerlifters, you see Pedialyte, you see Gatorade, you see things that have potassium and sodium in them. A lot of times I'll just shoot a whole couple salt packets, just shoot them right down right after I get off the scale, to get that back in. Oh yeah, it's terrible, but at least I don't pass out on the platform anymore.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, outside of that, you just don't want to go eat a Quest bar, something that's going to sit in your stomach like a big head of broccoli.
Or make you poop, the Quest bars.
But something that's not going to just sit there,
Yeah. Well, like jerky, deli meats, like we've always.
Jerky's great because it's got sodium.
Well, and it's small, right? Well, I'm real bad about that. If I have to wear a belt, I can't have food, like high volume foods. I prefer not to. And I think a thing with powerlifting meets is I've been to some or watched some online that are over within 2 hours. And then Brandon was just at one last week and it was like 6 hours. It's like you just need a bag. You just need a bag full of appropriate things, because you can't, there's no way usually that you would know how long you're going to be there.
Oh, one last thing on meet day. If you are one of those folks,
go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, one last thing on meet day. Remember, we should have not cut carbs going into it. So you just need some fluids and some salts more than anything. You can sneak in some carbohydrate, absolutely, before you warm up for your squats, which again, you have 2 hours. So
sometimes
not much time. Yeah, sometimes. So a clamato is perfect. It's funny and it's kind of tasting, but yeah, it's some irony, wonderfulness, like for someone who's just got off the scale. But the best time to eat is probably during the bench press, simply because you're laying down. It doesn't take as many muscles, so it's probably a good time to. If you need a sandwich before you finish this meet strong, that's probably the best time to do it. So snacks before the squat. Don't try to fill yourself up. You shouldn't be in that position. And then bench press. Hey, maybe the homies brought you a foot-long Subway sandwich, and that's probably the best time to take it.
Yeah.
By the time you get to deadlifts, you should be okay.
Yeah,
I always wonder what those folks have that end up puking when they're doing their squat. It kind of looks like a protein shake, which I don't know that I would have a protein shake.
This podcast is over.
No.
That's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, it does look like a protein shake. Yeah. I always kind of wonder, what did that person eat? I should go talk to them and find out, because I'm not going to recommend that anybody eat that.
It's like a pastel blue sometimes. It's like, what was that?
Exactly. Yeah. And boy, it just comes out of nowhere too. It's just like, I got this. Blah.
It's because they were possessed and they were lifting the 666 number of the beast. That's what it was.
That's what it is. No, and I remember, Bert, when I was first interested in powerlifting, like the big error that you would always talk about was with the 24-hour weigh-ins, people just like weighing in and then going to like 3 buffets and eating like 12 donuts and then expecting to perform well the next day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the opposite, like
Yeah,
feasting yourself into a shitty performance.
like your digestive tract needs water. Like like it needs a lot of water, and then you're just going to pound away. I think that's what Matt did. Matt Ogus, when he did his 1 meet, he went to a buffet like right after, and oh man, he was like, so that look when you've just eaten too much and you're just sitting there like sweaty, like
It's the meat
that's
sweats.
that's what Matt looked like the next day. Like he was
He did.
just not
He was
comfortable.
sweating just sitting there. I remember that.
Okay, so for higher level powerlifters, they know, essentially you would think, right? We know nutrition basics, sure, some fine tuning, but maybe some more advanced strategies like what you guys talked about throughout a season to make them peak better, I guess would be more it, because they already know how to lift. They already have the basics down if they're that strong, right? But for someone who has competitions on the horizon in the next 1 to 5 years, the basics would be the basics for bodybuilding too, right? But I mean, it doesn't need to be as well. There's just some skills that you would need as a bodybuilder that you might necessarily not need as a powerlifter, like nutritional skills, like weighing with precision and playing with volume more as you get like real empty.
Yeah, because it's just like Bert said. If you've got this large area that you're living in, or this pendulum of one end to the other end, you're going to stay right in the middle. Of the 100% of the space there, you're going to stay in that 80% in the middle, like almost all the time.
Right.
And really, the only time you're going to have to worry about, those 10% on each end is, like when we need to perform really good. We need to have, excess calories are just they're going to go to waste, right? And it's a high volume block. And we need to perform good, and we're going to be doing high reps. Well, maybe now we just don't get excess calories. Maybe now we eat a few more vegetables. We eat a few more very microdense foods during that portion, right? And then on the other side, maybe when you're cutting, maybe you have a few more vegetables on that side because calories are sparse and you don't have enough carbohydrate to go around. You just kind of save your carbohydrate for the pre-workout meal, and then you start to have your more fruits and vegetables to make those calories work. But those are the kind of the two opposite ends. The other 80% of the time, right in the middle, like Bert said, you're gonna just need to cover the basics. Make sure that you're getting enough calories, make sure you're having enough protein, and then it's just all pretty much gravy.
Yeah, anything to add, Bert, for?
Yeah, if you just go over like the muscle and strength, like pyramid on nutrition, you can be duped basically, and you will prioritize things the way they should be. I'd say the biggest difference, like just when I look at bodybuilders and powerlifters, like with bodybuilders, you have to develop skills like when it comes to training while you're in a deficit. Right? Like learning to cope with getting your requirements in training wise while not eating enough. For a powerlifter, it should never be that way. Like ideally, when you are cutting weight, it should be removed from anything that is important. Because again, like as much as I tell people, like, hey, you just need to focus on getting strong. You just need to focus on they're not going to do it. They're going to want to be in that weight class because, again, the totals in that other weight class are just too daunting. And LS McLean's in that weight class, it's not even time for that right now. So yeah, I'd say learn the principles of how things work. Just off that, you will be able to be like better than 90% of people who powerlift. I feel who are exclusively powerlifters. And then also, if you decide to go through fat loss phases, make sure it's during a block in your year that doesn't really matter that much. Like, I hope someday powerlifters just stop doing that like 6 weeks out from a meet. Like, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. It's frustrating. But yeah, that's and again, I think the biggest thing, the reason they do that, and I think most of them know that it shouldn't be that way, it's because they just don't have a lot of those good fundamental like habits that they
long
should
term
have.
habits.
Yeah. So it's not until they get that close to me, they're like, shoot, I need to make weight, that they start, doing things to lose weight. Whereas like if we just like learned how to act most of the year, we might not be in that sort of like predicament. And I know this is the case even with some really high level folks. It's like if they're not close to me, it's like, man, this is procrastination is what this is. You're going to have to deal with this at some point. So learning to develop habits that they don't have to be like bodybuilder-esque, just solid enough to keep you at a weight range that you want to be at.
Yeah. Well said. All right, I'm done. I think that's it. It's just from what I gather more than anything though too is nothing is ever drastic. And so like you said, like if there are a lot of ways to utilize your off season besides lift, even for powerlifting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks for chatting, guys.
Hey, let's go lift some weights.
Word.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. 3DMJ prides itself on keeping this show, our blog, and our YouTube channel as free and relevant sources of information for our community week after week. We also release additional free video courses as often as possible at 3dmjvault.com. If you'd like to help support our mission and our work, please consider becoming a monthly patron of our endeavors. Go to patreon.com/team3dmj and donate as little as $1 per month to our cause of helping educate and grow the drug-free bodybuilding and powerlifting communities worldwide. You can definitely choose to donate more, and if you do so, we'll send you discount codes for future use on any of our paid products. But any little bit helps, and we appreciate your monthly support in any amount that you see fit. So again, you can start assisting the team at patreon.com/team3dmj. That's patreon.com/team3dmj. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you in the next show.